Hey there, folks. I'm Matt Hansen.
And I'm John Johnson.
And you're listening to Planes, Trains, and Comic Books, the podcast where we discuss favorites we've reread, comics we want to read, and everything in between.
And here's the comic we picked this week.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of Planes, Trains, and Comic Books. And this week we went crazy and we read the most awesome book ever. It's called Hellblazer: Original Sins.
I don't know if you can tell if he's a little biased of that.
I love Hellblazer. He's my favorite human character, I guess. I don't know. Swamp Thing is my favorite. Hellblazer is a really, really close second. And they're both pretty much the same style of book. The horror, like gothic genre. So we read Hellblazer, the first trade paperback. So recently they started adding they started putting out all of them. I don't know. They're on like trade number 22 or something because there's 300 issues in the first run of Hellblazer. That went on for I think from 1988 to 2012 or 11. It was a full run. I have every issue. So, but John, you never read it, right?
No, my only real introduction and knowledge of Constantine is you telling me all the time, I love Constantine. You telling me little things about him, showing me photos and characters and statues and figures and things that you have of him.
Hey.
But also,
Pops.
Obviously, the Constantine movie, which, while even you have admitted to that, while it is a cool movie, I know it's not that's not exactly they bring in elements of him, but it's not him really as a character. So
yeah, I mean, he got some of it right. I don't hate Keanu Reeves as Constantine. I wish he would have dyed his hair blonde, but whatever. But he was American, and Constantine is the most British person ever. It'd be like if you're I'm gonna make Captain America French, and he doesn't have an American accent, and he doesn't have the same costume, or he's very much like that, where there's a specific look and feel.
Jean Reno is Captain America.
Jean Reno, yes, exactly. So, the movie actually, that was the first time I ever knew anything about Constantine. I saw the movie when it came out in 2003 or 2. So I went to the movies, and I'm like, this is weird. There's really cool parts in it, and there's really shitty parts in it. And there's super cool ideas, and then there's stuff that's why did they do that? And all the cool stuff I found after I actually got into comics and read it was from the comic, and everything that wasn't cool was fucking from some producer or whoever made him. Yeah, Shia LaBeouf. Shia LaBeouf ruined it. So, as you notice, Chaz in this comic is a 50-year-old man.
Yeah. Not
a 14-year-old taxi driver for some reason. I mean, he's a taxi driver in the comic, but he's not 14.
Yeah.
And doesn't explain how he's driving a taxi as a job. So I'm going to set this up with a little backstory, which John does not know because he has never read Swamp Thing.
Sure.
And Swamp Thing, there's a Swamp Thing run that's going on for about 4 years before this series started in 1988. So Swamp Thing started, I think Alan Moore started writing it in 1982. And then he created Constantine as a character for that, just to harass Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing's I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a plant person. And then Hellblazer's you have to go, there's an evil coming and you have to fight it. And you should go to this town and you should go to that town. And everywhere he goes, he tells them and I'll tell you more about yourself. And he never does. And he's you said you were going to tell me more about my powers and stuff. He's oh, did I say that? Anyway, I'll tell you next time after you go to this place, and just always strings him along. And he's a dick to him all the time. So that's how Constantine was created by Alan Moore. And then I think in 1987 or 1988, it splits off, or they gave Hellblazer or Constantine his own series, which was this that we read. So I think we read from issue 1 to issue 8 of Hellblazer, or 7. I think it's 1 through 7 or 8. And then we read, at the end of the trade, there's 3 issues of Swamp Thing thrown in the end that is a weird Swamp Thing story that I guess they just wanted to add in there as a funny thing. It didn't really have any consequences to the rest of the story.
Yeah, to everything else.
But it was like an interesting concept, I thought. So yeah, in Swamp Thing, Constantine like has been building up the entire time to get Swamp Thing to fight like this. There's this group of magicians in the Amazon, I think, like in Brazil or one of those areas, and they're like trying to raise this like ultimate evil, and it's just like it's evil beyond evil. It's like before. It's basically like a void. In the comic, it's like this big black nothingness that comes like it's past hell, because like hell is like a dimension, right? So if you go to hell and then you keep going, there's like this big black nothingness. And so in the Swamp Thing series, that's what happens. He gets him to fight. He gets Swamp Thing and like all the hell's minions to like split. Like he gets some of them to side with Swamp Thing and him and other DC heroes to fight against this void of nothingness. And then some of hell, is like, well, we're going to fight with the guy that we think is going to win, which is the void. And it ends up at the end that like a bunch of Constantine's friends die, which are all those ghosts. So in the series that we read in the trade paperback, Constantine is constantly haunted by his ghost friends that died in the Swamp Thing run. But you don't know that. They don't tell you.
I didn't really take it out of context because from first meeting of him in the thing we'll get into, but like he obviously did some bad stuff, and then he's haunted by. I understood he's haunted by friends from his past that he did or happened to be bad things done too.
Yes,
because of him. So I got that. So.
Yeah, I mean they make it pretty obvious like something happened, but they actually reference like the Invulce and the Brujeria or whatever, or the Brujeria. I can't remember. It's like the Bruja or whatever, but that also sets up like the main storyline of this trade paperback run of Hellblazer was now that Hell was like broken in half or broken into multiple factions because of that battle that Swamp Thing had. There's power voids, and some demons have come up to Earth to try to fill those voids and take over. And in doing so, they like basically they start. There's one demon named Nergal, and he is or Neagle, I don't know how you say, and he's like starting this group called the Damnation Army, and it's just they are causing havoc, and Hellblazer is just like one step behind them every time. So like he'll be walking, and then he'll see like he'll hear someone will tell him that there's like a dead body over there, and then it'll say like Damnation Army on the chest. And then he'll have to figure out why it says that and who they are and that. But that's what he's doing the whole time. He's always behind the demons like that are trying to take over. And then the other side of that is Heaven is also vying for this power because they see like, the demons are weak. We can take over. And there's like this super like culty group of super Christians, I guess, that are what are they called? They're called the Crusaders or
I think the Crusaders.
Christian Crusaders or something like that, and they're like the opposite of Damnation Army, but they're like fighting each other. And we're talking, the Christian Crusaders are just like pretty much a cult, like a super weird religious cult. But the Damnation Army, we're talking like weird monsters and like invulnerable people and all kinds of craziness. So that's basically what the first trade is about. Is him being one step behind from the ramifications that happened in Swamp Thing. So, but you didn't have an issue following that?
No.
No? Okay.
Oh, well, no. So, I had, that was the first one that I read, but then, I assume that it all connected, but each individual one I read still was like an...
Yes, that was very 80s too. In this, there's no overarching storyline through 6 issues. It's like, each one was its own separate story, and then they tied together through what happens in them. So instead of it being like a continuation of the story every time, it would be like, they would just show at the beginning some girl playing on a swing set. She gets kidnapped. Then Constantine has to go save her. Then at the end, you find out, it's all part of this Damnation Army thing.
I'd like to. It reminded me of some of the old Batman comics. There's a lot of detective work on his end as far as like figuring out like how to get to the demon or the things that have gone on, trying to figure out and piece that together,
Mm-hmm.
but with a little less as far as physical fighting because he runs he
Right.
runs away a lot.
Yeah, he runs away a lot. That's the one thing I like is he's not. I mean, he knows magic, but he's not like a great magician yet in this. Later on, he's more badass. Where like he'll walk into a room and be like, do a spell, and then he can actually go toe to toe with some demons and stuff. But I think that's actually part of this run because at the end of it, spoilers, he was all beat up, and Nergal gave him like his blood. They made like a deal, and Nergal was like, "I want you like fighting for us, or at least in the mix of this whole God versus demons and humans battle." And so he like gives Constantine his blood like in an IV drip while Constantine is on the hospital bed, and he like heals automatically, but now he's got demon blood. So like I think that actually elevates his magic later on. Like I think that's a part of a storyline in there. But yeah, it's very interesting. Very cool comic. Nothing quite like it that I've ever read. Except like Swamp Thing. Like if you read those things together, there's nothing that really matches them. So I should say this is written by Jamie Delano, and then the art is by who's it by?
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Well, the art style is really interesting. It's all hand drawn, of course, because it's in the 80s, and it's just super like sketchy and like really. There's a lot of lines and line work, and the colors are
John Ridgway.
Oh, that's right. John Ridgway does this one. That's right. Those guys that I mentioned, they do Swamp Thing, so that's why I got confused. So, yeah, John Ridgway's stuff looked fantastic. Did you notice there's one issue where like some other dude does like a dream sequence at the first 3 pages?
Yeah, it seemed out of place.
I was like, this looks weird. And there are some issues in the later run where like some guest people are there. I'm like, this looks terrible. Like there's one guy who apparently didn't realize it was a British comic, and all the cabs are yellow. They're all supposed to be black. It's London, so all the cabs are black. But so yeah, that run is pretty like art wise, but generally the stories are all pretty good. I haven't read the entire 300 issues all the way through. I know I own them.
What a fan! You own them all.
Well, I always read like I read the entire Jamie Delano run, which was like 1 through 60, and then I've read like around there, and then I've read the entire Garth Ennis run, which was like 60 to 95 or something, and then after that there's like a slump for a good like 50 issues or 40 issues, or at least that's what everybody's told me, and I haven't really got past the Ennis stuff. And then after that, Warren Ellis writes a good chunk of it, and that's good. And then Brian Rizzarello writes a whole chunk, and that's really good. And then I started reading Hellblazer and buying it at issue 230 or 229 or 230. And so from then on, I actually just bought them in the store and then read them, and then went back and bought all the back issues. So on that note, what do you think of the art?
I liked it a lot. I thought it was really pretty. It was 80s art, so the line work. The big thing that stuck out to me were the colors. Their color change from like night to day was really cool, as far as like the different shades of blue and the greens and the yellows. All the monster and character designs were pretty awesome. Yeah,
there's that one like there's one storyline where Nergal makes like he takes all these skinheads that he killed, and he makes them.
Oh, he makes like a
3-limbed or 3-legged and or 6-armed.
6-armed, I think, yeah.
Like a monster of these 3 guys like put together, or 4 guys put together. It's crazy. That was a weird monster, but it was good. Yeah, but one of the things I like about this, especially reading it in context of this is from 1988, is they don't pull any punches. They're talking about AIDS. They're talking about gay people and skinheads and demons and Christians and politics. I mean, he's like Constantine is obviously a liberal character, so he's talking about Maggie Thatcher and Ronald Reagan being like horrible people, and same with like obviously there's skinheads and stuff in the world, and they show like the skinheads being racist and saying racist things to people and things like that. I was like, oh, that's like way more impactful than I would think for back then. I mean, because you think of it back then, that's like comics are not supposed to even have anything swearing in it. This says the F word. They don't care. They'll say fuck or whatever. They don't care. So it's like an interesting book. I mean, this was a Vertigo book, which back in the 80s was like, it was the first line of DC that wasn't Comics Code approved, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because there's a lot of the cursing, there really wasn't nudity that you could see, but
there was some.
There was some suggestive
there was some
ones for sure.
Yeah, but so at this time Vertigo was like really successful because what DC did was they brought over all these British writers that were like Neil Gaiman and Grant Morrison and Alan Moore and all these people. I don't know, just really good artists and good writers from back then that are still around today. They're all like solid writers and artists now too. And they gave them all these books that were like, nobody knew about them. No one cared. And they're like, go for it. Like, we're going to give you a Vertigo under the Vertigo brand of DC, which is like the adult mature reader one. And it really was like, they were probably like, you can do pretty much anything you want. Just, besides, I guess, like maybe the worst thing you could think of. I can't think of anything that was in that comic pretty much everything in this comic was talked about. I mean, there was like an orgy scene where Nergal was like, please me, humans. And it's like, what the fuck? That, and I don't know, what else was there?
That's one of the things I was going to say when I saw that scene. And I was trying to take that in context. It was like, was it please me and they were just like biting him because they didn't get to? Or was it all and sexual? So
when you read the words, because it's like the narrator, I guess, and the author, he's just talking about it, and it's like, yeah, he's getting blowjobs and whatever. There's like, they say pretty much exactly what they're thinking, or what you're thinking when you look at that. And then, I mean, Constantine just constantly is having relations.
I love his inner monologue while things are happening too. Like, he's having a conversation with somebody, and then you'll get inner monologue thoughts in there as well, and it's hysterical.
It's actually the only character I can think of that has that, like, as much and as moving forward, like, inner monologue as Constantine, because every Constantine comic I've ever read has that. Even like the new stuff that's not read or written by Jamie Delano or anything. Everyone, and it also takes a little bit longer to read because of that, because every panel has some kind of inner dialogue.
I just kind of start back a little beginning, because you were talking about how he gains things originally. So you saying that now makes it funny, because one of the quotes that stuck out to me was towards the beginning when he said he's Billy the Kid and Genghis Khan rolled into one.
Yeah,
but he's nowhere near. He's near that badass.
That's him talking bad. Yeah. Well, and that's how, I mean, that one of the things that they don't wrap up for a really long time in the run is Newcastle. They keep mentioning that, back in Newcastle, that was pretty bad or whatever. Like, they keep referencing this thing that happened in Newcastle, England, sometime when Constantine was in a punk band back in the day. And they don't really ever mention it other than just that name, Newcastle, and it was bad. They never, like, bring up what actually happened fully. It's interesting that they do that. They just keep teasing you with it. Was there any issues that stuck out, being that they were kind of individual?
Yeah, I think my favorite one was either the second or the third one. I really liked the dilemma that they had where the demons were on Earth trying to vie for things, and like they killed a jogger in the beginning.
Oh yeah,
I love that scene. Like they're like jogging with him. He's like, "Hey guys, what are you doing here?" And they have a little mini conversation, and then he trips and falls his face. He's trying to keep up, and he dies. And then like the one like picks up the blood and like smears it in the book, like almost like it's a list of something. And then everyone licks the finger, and it's like, yeah, job well done. And you see a little later them in their demon forms talking about like, oh yeah, that's prime real estate up here. We can get, we can really bring this together. And the thing that really tied that one together for me is when he goes and talks. He makes a summon for their main guy, which I couldn't tell if it was the devil himself or it was just the character.
No, it's not the devil himself.
The character is Blathox, and he has like a little ceremony, Constantine, to summon him, because he's like the head of the two other demons that he saw. And he overheard a lot of that, and so he summons him, and he doesn't come. It's like his little steward guy, and he's like, this is a really pathetic attempt at summoning a demon, but I mean, I guess he doesn't have anything better to do, so if you want to come with me. So they go down there, and like it was really cool setup. It was almost like a mob kind of a scene. Like he looked like the kind of like the Godfather sitting there, and it's like, oh, what do you want from me? And he tries to like barter with him, but he's like, that's ridiculous. And then he says something, and then Constantine says something like, well, I don't know, maybe such and such is gonna happen, and it messes with the Blofeld character because he's like, wait a minute, do you know something I don't know? And they treat that as like the stock market, or like, oh, he's got insider trading of stuff.
Yeah, that's what it was.
We need to make a run on this market up there and take these souls now. And
yeah, that was like, it was him. He didn't actually have anything.
Yeah,
he was just trying to make them doubt, because now then they doubt, and then they have a run on the banks or whatever, or the stock market. Yeah, I like that whole story, like the idea of like these yuppies are demons, and it's like super kind of like 80s vibe to them. Like they're all kind of like the Wall Street, movie. That kind of, they all have those big phones, and they all have like jogging suits on all the time, or just the three-piece suits. So yeah, that one stuck out to me. Any other ones?
I liked Zed as a character too. His like main squeeze there for a while. Like,
yeah.
She was a pretty strong character for playing second fiddle to him. Like she held her own in a lot of it. I liked her matching hair and outfits. I like that coordination. I like the
I liked her design too. Like the hair was like very 80s, and like like a punk rock 80s girl kind of thing. The vibe she had. And I don't think I'm trying to remember if she's in any other.
She's in a couple because he goes back to her later on.
No, yeah, but I mean like in the comics
like
later on. Yeah, I don't think she's in any other issues that I can remember, because she doesn't. Well, they must have her do something, because so spoilers in this. Zed is supposed to be. Zed is this girl that he meets, and he's just like, oh, she's hot, and she's kind of mixed up in this, and we don't know what she's about. And it turns out she ran away from the Christian Crusaders and is on the run from them. And so when they come to get her back from Constantine, they find out, they keep calling her Mary, and it turns out she's supposed to be like the new Mary, like she's supposed to give birth to the next Christ or whatever.
Yeah, she's going to be basically bring about the savior of.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be like the next coming of Jesus or whatever. So, but then because Constantine has demon blood in him, and he goes and has sex with her, like they're like, oh, she's gonna be Mary or whatever. And I think that comes back, because they never reference that again after the issue where that happens. They don't know that she's had sex with him, and he's had a demon.
So they have a relationship at first, like they get together and they're kind of getting to know each other, and then they get feelings, and he's like, I'm gonna inspect their body further and to see what this is all about, and then they do it, and then
hardcore.
Yeah. Well, those are the panels. Like I said, like the way the art was done, it was like you could tell things were going on, you could see outlines of things, but it was
shaded in the right areas. Yeah.
But so then when the Crusaders come and get her later and take her away, and they they kind of like not re-brainwash her, but re-bring her back to like what you're for, and she's kind of like, okay, I'll accept this, I'll do my duty.
Well, I think they kind of insinuated that they like actually did like shock therapy, because that's what they did to Constantine and stuff.
But the reason I was saying that is because when she sees Constantine again, when he like makes a trip to find her, she has like a moment of like, I shouldn't, but let's do this one more time. Because I'll always.
And that's right after he got the demon blood from Nagal.
Yeah.
And she's like, how'd you heal so fast?
Yeah, because he got beat the fuck up.
Well, yeah, I think he jumped out of a train, and it broke his legs and his arms and his ribs and all that stuff.
Yeah, he
couldn't even move at all. Yeah. Well, and that was in that issue when they take Mary back. There's so one of John Constantine's like things that is a trope of his series is, if you are a friend of John Constantine, you are probably going to die eventually. He does not have friends for very long. So if you notice, he has ghost friends that visit him and haunt him from the Swamp Thing run, and then he's got all of his friends that appear in this series.
Almost every single one. He's like, hey, buddy, like, bad stuff's happened to you, and I'm going to help you figure out why. And then towards the end of it's like, oh, I'm going to fix this. And then to get the bad stuff from stopping happening to that person, they basically have to die.
Yeah, they have to die. Or he tries to help them and they die.
They die
or
anyway.
You know. But I think the coolest one was he's got this friend named Richie who is like a computer whiz, and this is in 1988, so take that what that means. But he has found a way to, let's call it, surf the web, but like the networks.
The fifth dimension.
Enter the fifth dimension, yeah. And he takes like a hit of peyote or something like that, or LSD or something, and then he like matrixes out. He like puts these probes on his head, and then he like goes into a trance, and then can go into the internet, and then he will hack into places from there, like literally hack, like walk to the Bank of America website or whatever it was back then, the network, I guess, that they're on. And so
and that was some of the coolest artwork in the book, by far.
The whole time I was reading this, I was like, when does that happen? Because I was like, is that in a later run? Because that was one of the coolest like ideas that I read. I love that cyberpunk kind of vibe, and there's when he goes into the computer, the art goes from like reality. Oh, that was the art in this book. There's very cool transition panels and stuff, but there and lots of splash pages with different arrangements of dialogue boxes and things, but not confusing. It was just interesting and different. But in this instance, Richie like is the first shots of him like laying down and it's his whole body in a chair, and then it's like his astral body coming up out of him, and then like he's floating down, and as he's doing, he's turning like clockwise on the page, and then he's like floating, but his body is like translucent the more it goes through. So each iteration of his body on the page is more translucent, and it looked totally computer done. Don't know how they did it.
Yeah, for that was the thing. Looking at that page, it went from hand drawn to digital in look, but it's all hand drawn.
All hand drawn.
That was amazing.
I don't know. He must have done it with like some kind of translucent papers or something. I don't know, but it looked phenomenal. It was amazing, and I was happy they didn't go too in depth into what the internet looked like. It was just him walking in like a 3-dimensional space. Because some of those 80s interpretations of what an internet is ridiculous and laughable now.
Well, all of that is, nobody could imagine. But anyway.
Yeah. So
his death is almost the saddest, just because of.
Oh yeah. So we should say his death. So in this, Richie's like his last friend that's alive that's going to help him, and he goes in there and he's trying to help John break into the encrypted files of Tongues of Fire. Is that what?
I think so.
Okay, so there's like a branch of the Christian Crusaders that's like the super inner group of the Christian Crusaders called the Tongues of Fire, and they had like a very high security network, and he was trying to get information on that. And when he did, they had a bunch of booby traps, and it basically fried his body. Like his body combusts while he's in the internet.
Yeah, his physical body up in flames, his head explodes. It's crazy.
That was a crazy panel. Yeah. I was like, oh my God. And his body just bursts into flames and falls over like a pile of bone and ash and gross and everything. But you could still hear him on the internet. He's like, hey John, I think I got it. It was crazy. I just went like wacky for a second, but now I'm back. Go make a pot of tea and we'll,
we'll celebrate.
Yeah. And like in the meantime, John's like, all right, sorry folks, we're back. We had a little audio trouble there for a second, but anyway, so yeah, Richie is stuck in the internet, and he's like, oh yeah, I'll be back in just a second, and John is staring at his smoldering body like, oh fuck, and he doesn't know what to do. He can't get out of it. And he doesn't want to tell his friend that his body just burned up and he's stuck in the internet. So he just turns the computer off. While saying, like, I know this is a shitty thing, but I don't want to tell him that his body is dead.
Yeah. It's like, unplug.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, and in the meantime, he's like, John, I don't see my way out. John? John, this isn't fucking funny. I'm stuck here or whatever. And he's just like, oh fuck. And he just pushes power on the computer, which I assume kills him. And I'm like, oh my fucking God. You could have left him in the computer. What would have happened? You'd be like a cool Pac-Man.
Yeah, could have figured out a way.
Like Wreck-It Ralph or something. Make his own world inside of the interwebs. So yeah, that was like another one of his friends that died. But that one was like one of the cooler ones that died like that. And you didn't have any personal attachment to him. But there was a character. I can't remember his name right now, unfortunately. But he was another friend of John's. He's this old, nice gentleman who lets John stay at his house with Zed when they're hiding from...
Ray,
that's his name. And so Ray is gay in the 80s, and he just found out he had AIDS.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like super nice, and you kind of like you grow with this character through the book. He's in it more than just in one issue. So you're like, oh, I like Ray. He's cool. And then the Christian Crusaders come to take Zed back, and they murder Ray, but they murder him because he's gay. They're like, you're a sodomite, let's beat the shit out of him. And they beat the fuck. It's really, really graphic and violent.
It was really tough.
It was actually like, whoa, this is crazy, because it's also 80s. It's in the 80s. It's super fucked up that this was in a comic. I mean, you could not do that in a comic nowadays, I don't think. Maybe if your comic was about like Matthew Shepard or something like that, but
not just out on its own randomly in a story. Yeah,
yes,
that would probably not fly now.
But this was like in a time when just having a gay character was pushing the boundaries, especially one that wasn't evil. He's a nice guy.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So I think that was what they were going for. Was like he had AIDS, and Constantine wasn't like ugh. He was like, oh, like, how can I help you, friend? Like, at the time, I think that was boundary pushing in its own, So, but it was very, like, I was actually like, oh, man, I feel really, really bad for Ray. And yeah, it was just one of those things that hit you harder in a comic. Other than that, like, what else? Oh, there's the whole swamp thing. They kind of, first off, they kind of leave this hanging because it continues with the Damnation Army and Nergal and stuff later on.
There's just a quick points in there. The one that about the guy who has like the Vietnam flashbacks.
Oh yeah, what is that, issue 4? There's one issue. You want to tell him about it?
Oh, it's just this guy's having. It starts off with him, and he's kind of he was in Vietnam, and he's having flashbacks, and then because of all the demons and everything that's coming up to Earth, all the hellspawn, it's causing like hallucinations as well. So on top of PTSD hallucinations, he's having these hallucinations, and Constantine, I forget why he goes there.
Well, he's just kind of following weird shit. It's kind of like Supernatural or whatever, where like stuff happens and he like goes there. Yeah.
Yeah, he goes, and so like he's trying to help the guy out, like, hey, like there's obviously something happening here, and we're gonna figure this out. And so he's like trying to get the guy to go away because he's almost shot Constantine. He's almost killed a couple people in his family. He's like, let's get you away from here. And so as he's getting like as that issue progresses and he's getting that person away, like there's like a really bad episode of him having this and seeing these things.
And all of a sudden, everybody's Charlie.
Everybody.
He's like, I'm in the jungle. And there's Charlie over there, and it's his wife.
And his wife's like, hey, honey. And he's already tried to kill her once before, and she snapped him out of it. But he's like, oh, you yellow.
Oh, that was the other thing. I mean, they don't pull any punches with their language. Oh, like they were saying very, very, very.
You yellow, and then all sorts of other derogatory.
I mean, yellow's bad enough, but then you go off with, I think, just anything you derogatory term for Asian.
Said it.
Yeah. So, and then he another one of the other things he does is, I guess, in Vietnam, it's not that he just had PTSD from seeing bad stuff. He did bad stuff, and in Vietnam, apparently, he raped a Vietnamese woman, and he relives all of that on the people in this town, specifically on his wife. He's seeing this girl from Vietnam, and he's having his flashback, and but it's actually his wife, and he rapes his wife in the issue, and she's like, "What the hell?" Like, wake up, and he's not waking up, and he's just doing what he did in Vietnam, and then And then he also was like, oh, I see, we're being attacked. And there's just like the townsfolk, and he's just mowing them down with his M16. It was like super fucked up, especially like thinking about stuff that happens nowadays with guns and everything. I'm like, this book seems really like ahead of its time for what it's talking about, or just maybe time cyclical, like things are happening. I mean, obviously in England, there's no shooters back in the 80s, and in America, that wasn't really a thing either. So the fact that you have like a white guy who's having PTSD flashing back, but he's like also racist and stuff, it's kind of like poignant for nowadays. That issue really stood out. Was there anything else in that issue that you wanted to?
Not particularly in that issue. The only other thing I do really like the everything towards the end with Nergal, where he get like we were saying before, he's in the hospital bed, the way he like wakes him up and he like almost makes out with him with his long tongue.
Yeah.
And then he's like, hey, so I know you don't, or like he called him before, but he didn't know who he was. And so the first time they meet face to face is John all broken in the hospital bed. And he's like, so what's up? Like, we gonna do this? And he's like, do what? And he's like, I told you you're gonna be on my team, right? And and like you said, he talks about, are you gonna at least join the fray and and help with this, ongoing war. Such and such.
He just wants him in the mix. He doesn't. I mean, he knows he's not going to side with a demon, and he knows he's not going to side with an angel. He wants him in the mix. I think that in the reason why I was saying that I think Zed's later on is because there's actually, I think in the next trade, or there's a storyline where there's like the baby, which is like a seed of an angel and a demon or something like that. There's some weird thing about that, and it's kind of basically it's like the story that Preacher, it spawns like the idea for Preacher, that other series from Vertigo. So it's like a very similar idea from what Preacher was. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's a little bit later on. I think like in the next trade or two, which we'll probably read since we both like this one a lot.
Definitely, yeah. No, Constantine is awesome.
But we should also talk about so after Constantine, after this trade was over, or the Hellblazer story was over, there was 3 issues of Swamp Thing which kind of just were thrown in, I guess, for fun. Like maybe you'll like Swamp Thing if you read this. And I had just read all of the Swamp Thing run that came before this. So at this time, Swamp Thing and Abby Arcane, his wife, or his lover, are living in the swamp. They've totally gone away from humanity, and they're living in like this bungalow that Swamp Thing made out of trees and stuff. And I guess they made like an idea of Swamp Thing can take over John Constantine's body and have sex with Abby, and then they can have a baby that is like part elemental green power, like Swamp Thing, and part human. And that's what they decide they wanted to do. So it's weird though, because it's Constantine, so Abby hates Constantine. So eventually she's like, I can't go through with this because I can't tell if you're actually Swamp Thing inside or you're just Constantine fucking with me. Because it could be Constantine playing a joke just to have sex with her and piss Swamp Thing off or whatever. And she doesn't ever like let go with it, right?
Not really, because when Swamp Thing appears through the tobacco that he's going to smoke, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that was great.
Awesome.
Like,
I like that.
John gets out his little tobacco tin, and all of a sudden you're like, whoop, 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 and you see like Swamp Thing coming out of it, and he grows up, and then you just see like Constantine grab a pinch off of Swamp Thing, and he starts smoking it.
So but he kind of forcibly takes over Constantine.
Yeah, it's not a okay thing for Constantine. I don't really know how he did that. He doesn't have that power earlier on in the series, so maybe that's something that happens in the 5 issues between the end of the Alan Moore run and that, because I've never seen him take over a body, but he can control like all flora inside of you and stuff. But in this, he actually like it shows him like going into like all the orifices of John, like his nose and his mouth and stuff, like forcefully. So I don't know quite how he did it, but supposedly he can take over his body.
Yeah, and then when he gets together with Abby, then they get naked and they start to, but then when they go to kiss, she's like, "Oh my god, like you just taste like smoke because it's John.
Yeah, you taste like cigarette.
I cannot do that." Like, and that reminds her that it's John. So they have a kind of a little back and forth with that.
Yeah.
But no, then I think that she finally.
Yeah, I think he like says like he tells her something that only he could know or something, and she's like, okay. So I think they do end up doing it because I know later on in another run, I think by Brian K. Vaughan, I think, or Mark Millar maybe, there is a baby. There's like a Swamp Thing child that is like a girl named, I don't know what's her name. I can't remember. I haven't read it, so I haven't read past the Alan Moore run with Swamp Thing. So, well, I've read the new stuff. I'm starting to read the Snyder stuff that happened with the new 52 and all that nonsense that they're redoing.
But I did like the end of this where, like, so Constantine and her had sex, and you could tell, like, Swamp Thing, even though with Swamp Thing, he still kind of is, like, a little, like, annoyed by it, and so he makes, like, all the physical, like, out of plants, he makes all these, like, physical caricatures of people, and he's, like, punching holes in them, and knocks Constantine's head off, and then Constantine was taking care of Abby for something, and then he brings her back to Swamp Thing, and she's like, okay, I'm staying, see you later, and Swamp Thing's like, yeah, I guess, thanks, and he goes over and he's like, you're welcome, buddy, and like kind of give him this side hug. Swamp Thing's like,
yeah, I hate you. Yeah, I think they showed that, they added that to the book because it's like the whole run of Swamp Thing, Hellblazer's an asshole, and this time Swamp Thing got to be an asshole to Hellblazer. He took him over and messed him up a bit. So I think that's pretty much everything we could talk about this issue. Really good. What would you rate it?
Well, I would say first again, I really do look forward to reading more of it. Overall, for introduction really to the character, with not having all that backstory and extra, I thought they did a very good job. And I was definitely sucked in that first one. We didn't really catch on like the like bug creature going into people as much.
Yes, that was in the first issue. It's all about this fly demon that like possesses you and makes you insatiable, hungry for whatever you lust for. So there's people like eating diamonds because they're like super like they want diamonds or they want whatever. Or there's people like eating shoes because they love shoes or
just some eating raw meat, eating whatever. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like Constantine being a smirky jerk out of the bat, and then like that, like that was completely out of left field for a demon for me because my thought is what I saw in the movie and what I conceptually believe as demons,
right?
And see are little creatures with horns or whatever, and so like seeing that aspect of it, that was really cool. So I was immediately hooked in.
Nice.
So I would say overall, I'd probably give it an 8.
An 8, sweet, yeah. So for me, this is a 9 just because I love Constantine. It is the first run. It's the first introduction. Like I said, it only gets better for about 100 issues. I mean, like every run of it or every trade of it's gonna get better. Well, we might even read some of the bad trades. I don't know.
maybe we'll read at least the first 100.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And so, yeah, I would definitely give this a 9 for art and creativity and all that. Just it's great. It's like what good comics should be, kind of thing. Like pushing boundaries.
Well, like I said, even if you've never picked it up, you can literally read. You can read any one of the issues in this, and still get a sense of the character that he is.
You might not know everything that's going on, but you're like, okay, I kind of like this Constantine. He's like, he's got attitude, and he's he's an asshole, and he kind of like his cheekiness, and and then like the issue finishes, and you're like, oh, I kind of want to read more. So, well, that's good. All right, well, we'll for sure hit this again. I'm sure we'll read more. We got to read Swamp Thing too. So, well, I think that we're done.
That'll be it this time.
Yep.
Catch y'all next time.
See ya.
Well, folks, hope you enjoyed that episode.
If you did and you'd like to follow us on social media, our Facebook is Planes, Trains, and Comic Books, and our Instagram is @Planes, Trains, and Comic Books, all one word.
And be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more recommendations to add to your weekly pull list.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.